What is up, all you beautiful people? It's Jaggy here, and I'm coming out with a Mario Kart Wii related video for once. For those of you that have been subscribed to my channel, you've been seeing a lot of, soccer/football type of videos, but for the first time in, 6 months, probably more, I'm coming out with a Mario Kart Wii related video. This time it's going to be a tier list video on the MKWC World Cup 2021 teams. I'm really excited to bring you this video because first of all, let me get rid of this stupid ad. And unfortunately, it's not letting me do that, so I'm just going to have to go with it. I'm just going to have to run along with it, not wasting any time with this video, going right into it. Yeah, it's not letting me do that, unfortunately, but real quick disclaimer before I get into the video. I'm really excited for this MKWC World Cup. I think it's going to be a lot more interesting than last season in terms of new teams, new additions, and I think, as well as the two USA teams, the gap has been bridged in terms of the skill level. Last season, USA East was, drastically better than US West. Maybe not as much on paper, but chemistry, speaking about the chemistry and the overall performance, US West had a very underwhelming season. But I'm putting Team Africa in the D tier. I think they're looking a little bit better than last season, especially with the addition of Forvex. He's going to be kind of serving as that replacement for Monies, who played for them last season. I think that they're virtually the same from last season. Nemo was kind of their fourth runner. Other than that, though, I feel like they're lacking a little bit in running depth. Freud is a bit underrated, but he doesn't really have that much competitive MKWC experience. It's a lot of worldwides and a little bit of TTs, as well as the fact that he does like to go Birdo Mock. I'm not necessarily sure if he's going to be doing that in this particular tournament. Optilizer is another okay player. I think he's silver and lounge. Borderline silver, borderline gold, probably sitting at about mid 2.5k MMR. But, Zom, Zuzu, and Forvex are three pretty strong runners. And then in the bagging department, you have Yazid, who has some bagging experience. But I feel like Yazid is a little bit, he takes a few unnecessary risks in the bagging, whether it's hitting a 10th place box or, something along those lines. And, he's okay in the bagging strats, not too consistent though. But Yazid, if you match him up against a bagger that's not too experienced in the game, he's going to blow them out of the water. But if you put him up against like a Mac or a Kion or a really top level bagger, then I feel he may struggle a little bit. So D tier for Africa. Next up on the list, we got Team Asia, and I'm actually really excited to see how Asia are going to be doing this season. Last season, they were a little bit, they were lacking a little bit in running depth, but they have a couple of crucial additions. For one, you got MLP. You also have Lexin/Smash from AP and Charge. While Charge is not, someone that you'd think of that would, put up a bunch of points every week in and week out, he is a very intellectual player, good item usage, very good schlag work. He knows the ins and outs of the game, and I feel like he could be someone that could slot in as a potential fourth runner. But if you want to go with pure running power, you got the likes of Emil, Pix, Fire, Vale as well from AP. And then you have, a couple of decent runners in Lexin and Charge. Iris, too. I'm not sure. He hasn't played too many wars. I know him from Lounge. But, you have a little bit of depth there. And I don't think the chemistry is going to be too far off either. You can only do so much with running power. You have Emil P, who calls a decent amount of the shocks. And Fire, even though he's a bit of a quiet guy, also calls a few shocks. I played with him since the JJ days. Does call good shocks. And all around, he's a solid player. Not really strong in one particular facet of the game, but he has decent lines, decent item usage. I think he'll be a good runner for them. Picks, obviously, very strong. Bagging situation is okay. They got Arvin and Elias. Arvin is a decent bagger. He's not up there in like the A or S tier yet, but he has some upside, and if you give him some practice, I think he'll be okay. I'm going to be putting Asia in the B tier. Next up is Australia, and I'm super stoked to see Australia. I'm going to be going off right off the bat. I already know what tier I'm going to be placing them. They're going straight to the B tier. I think, it's going to be their debut, obviously, in the MK World Cup scene, but they're going to be coming out guns blazing. I mean, you got pretty strong runners in Nuclear. Lockie has very solid lines. If you get him to a top 2 spot, very good lines. Maybe a little bit less consistent in, avoiding backs and whatnot, but he's a strong runner. You also have Verley, who's all around solid, been playing the game for a few years. Barry, very not as strong of a runner lines wise, but has good shortcut ability, BC3 Ultra. Every now and again goes for the BCW glitch. And then you have, PK, lounge player. Tulls, who's an okay runner, but he's been with the Quintessence group / Australia crew for a while now. ICU as well, who's going to be their backup bagger with their main bagger being Solar. The bagging situation's okay. Solar's been practicing a lot with the team. I'd say he's maybe a B-level bagger. ICU has a lot of bagging experience as well back in the WL days, Season 10 with Quintessence. I think this side is looking pretty good. I think their running depth is not as strong, I'd say, as Asia, but among their top 4 runners, their starting lineup and maybe their first sub, they are looking really, really strong. So I'm gonna say a B tier overall for Australia. Next up, we got Canada, and they are one of the more versatile teams in this entire tournament. When I say versatile, I mean they have a lot of players that fit several different play styles. You have Artie Kuno, who can run, but is mainly known for his mid-pack presence and his schlagging ability and his intelligence within that mid-pack. He knows when to schlag, knows when to run. And then you have, a couple of really strong runners in Jonah, for one. Very experienced player, has been playing since the pre-Weem days. And then you also have someone like Spart, who does tend to get rusty if, he takes a few days of a break. He will, you will see that in his driving. Does get a little nervous too whenever he does get streamed, but when he plays, consistently, when he plays every day or at least close to every day, he is an absolute force. He has a very high ceiling, and obviously can bag as well, so you can have him bagging when necessary. But I think they have Noah Cove as their main bagger to slot in to have Spart running. So I think you may see a starting lineup of Artie Kuno, Jonah, Spart, maybe Insane as the 4th runner, if not Zesty. I think Zesty is a little bit less consistent than someone like Insane, but Zesty does have a strong running presence when he gets up there. Very good shot caller as well. Provides the versatility in the track picks. That's also another talking point in regards to the versatility of this team, is that Zesty, very strong in the BCW glitch, very strong in the BC3 Ultra. Overall, one of the best shortcut takers in the game, really. So I think they're going to really benefit off of that. And then you have Sargent, which is a very interesting addition, mainly a lounge player. Doesn't really play too much wars. We'll see how he slots in. Hiruko, very experienced player, but hasn't played that much lately. Kyle, of course, plays with CB. We'll see what happens going forward. I think you may see Kyle slotting in the rotation every now and again, but we'll see what happens. Next up is Denmark, who I feel are a little bit top-heavy. You obviously have Sharon, who's a prominent MW runner. You have Casper, who's an MW2 runner / bagger. In the bagging, he's kind of inconsistent, though. I played against him, and he knows the strats, but every now and again he fails and kind of falls behind a little bit. But Casper, he knows the bagging strats. You could have him bag, but I'd say it's in their best interest to have him run, as I think he's a little bit stronger of a runner than he is a bagger. And then you could have Bob slotting as a 3rd player. Faith, a.k.a. Yasu, is also another decent runner. Very strong with certain tracks like GV, for example. I think that's his best track, honestly. Very, very consistent with the Rock Hop. You barely see him missing it. And also decent runner all around. Does tend to tilt a little bit, but I think he has kind of kept a cool head in recent years, I'd say. And then the bagging department is a little iffy here. If you don't have Casper run, you can maybe have Ice bag, but last season they had an all run strat in which did not work at all. They fell flat on their face on several occasions in that particular tournament. But you could have Ice bag. I'd say just force him to bag either him or Mate. You could have Mate bagging. I think he has a little bit less experience than someone like Ice, but the bagging situation is very questionable. The depth is also lacking a little bit. You know what? I think they're a borderline C tier team. Eastern Europe. Oh boy. Okay, so there's a running joke. Maybe not. It's not a community-wide running joke, but Eastern Europe. There was somebody that said that they're holding trials on the streets to search for 1 or 2 more players. Holding trials, passing out flyers to people on the streets. We need a couple more people. I mean, you have maybe 1 or 2 players that can keep them afloat. You have Radeon. You have Amos, Behemoth, who is a borderline silver / bronze player in Lounge. But also you have Saturn, too. Actually, I'm going to move them up to F. I'm going to move them up to F because they have a couple of players that could keep them afloat. Like I mentioned, Amos, Saturn, Radeon. I think that might be Ape Nico, if I'm not mistaken. Not to be confused with Nikos, the VC player. Nico is okay. I don't know how much he's played recently. But other than that, I'm not too sure. I think I'm going to keep them in F because I see a couple of names that I recognize. But yeah, I'm not seeing too much going for Eastern Europe. Sorry. So little technical difficulty. I think I noticed the lighting kind of change. Like I go over here and I'm super dark and hard to see. Needless to say, I have a shit webcam. So I'll stay right here and we'll move forward. That being said, though, I had England, but England's over here. They come before Finland. But next up is England. Is MKW World Cup coming home this season? I wouldn't bet against it. I think they look very, very strong this year. I'm putting them straight into the S tier. They have a couple of new additions and a couple of losses from last season. Losses being Klein and who else? I don't remember. But they added Joss, Taz, and Ryan, the dynamic trio from Moonblast. I don't think any of them will be in the ideal starting lineup, but I do think that Taz is a very strong candidate to come off the bench. The starting lineup I may see being Luke, Sean, Xander, Fleury as that fourth runner because of that chemistry with England. I do think I would rate Taz over Fleury personally because Taz, he's a very strong runner. Every now and again, you'll have these hiccups where he drops, 60 or 70. 90% of the time, you'll see him drop 90 plus. And I think he's a very strong player, very consistent with shortcuts like, GV, Rock Hop, BC3 Ultra, super strong with Funky. Overall, very strong front-running presence. I would have Taz over Fleury, but I think Fleury is going to be their fourth runner because of chemistry. He's been there for a while now. And then the bagging situation is on freaking point. You got Jazz, and even with the loss of Klein, you have someone in Arrow who's been, I'd say he's one of the OGs. I'd say he's in that quote-unquote Mount Rushmore of bagging. He's been there since, I don't know, like 2015, 2016 he's been bagging. And, he knows all the strats. Very, very solid bagger. I think this team is looking very strong overall. And, I don't really see them dropping too many losses. Maybe to USA North or to maybe Japan. I think they beat USA South. And I'll get into that later when I talk about USA South. But I'd rank England over USA South personally. And overall, they're looking very strong. You could see someone like Joss coming in. He's a very good communicator, very intellectual player. He likes to analyze things a lot. And, very good shot caller. I think you could have Joss coming in as a fourth runner in case Taz can't sub in potentially. Ryan, I think, needs to work on his consistency a little bit more at the top level of play. But, you have all these runners that are really solid. Malone is interesting. We'll see how he does. I don't think he's going to play much, but, MV prospect, MV staple. We'll see what happens. All right, so next up is France. And I think France, they're probably the definition of a B-tier team. They have a very consistent roster all across the board, but they don't really have that diamond in the rough, so to speak. Aside from maybe King. I think King is a really strong player all around, good lines. Good playmaking ability. If you see him in third or fourth, he may go for a snipe, and he's very good at getting players out of top spots. So maybe he's a candidate for the diamond in the rough position. But other than that, I don't really see a player that can really stand out and shine. Daru has a lot of experience in lounge, and he is a playmaker, but he's a little bit less consistent than King. Every now and again, he'll have these performances where he'll drop some points. And then Nico is also a decent runner. But every now and again, he kind of gets stuck in the middle of the pack and has a hard time breaking the plane. Miracle is a strong runner, however, inconsistent. Every now and again makes plays, individual errors that can kind of cost his team. Knight, also an okay runner, but I wouldn't see him breaking the top three every single race. So all around, they have good depth in the running department. You could also see someone like Gisco coming in the running, Fatal potentially. But I just think they lack that firepower that could really help them break the glass ceiling, so to speak, of the A tier and the S tier teams. So I'm going to have them as a B for now. In the bagging department, though, they look fairly solid. They have Akio, who's been very much improved, in 2020, 2021. Has been bagging for guns since late 2019, early 2020. And I gotta say, Akio is very difficult to get the shock off of, especially with him being a daisy main, and he knows the strats. Overall, consistent bagger. Shaka a little bit less consistent in the bagging, but also has a good amount of bagging experience. I think they're okay. B tier for France. Next up is Finland, and oh boy, if I were to describe them in one word, depleted. No sweep, no puff, no ruby, no E2, no polar. 5 crucial players for them, all coming from Moy, obviously. Whether it's because they had a poor performance last season going 0-3 in their group, and they got demotivated from that, or they just don't want to play the game in general. It could probably be a combination of the two. But, Finland, I don't really recognize any of these players aside from Arvo and actually Karhuma. I have seen his name pop up. I've seen him in a couple of time trials. Decent time trials, but I don't know if he has that much war experience. I think he's kind of testing the waters a little bit with competitive MKW. Other than that, I think I've seen Hedwig's name around, but other than that, I don't really see anybody that could not only break the glass ceiling of the top echelon of teams, but keep them afloat, period. And I'm sorry, I'm going to quote Falling from Grace with a song that they came out with years ago named Sorry. And I want to say, I'm sorry, I can't tell you how I feel inside. I wish you knew. You're going to the Timmy Jimmy tier. And next up, we got Team Germany. And I had a couple of question marks with Team Germany going into this. What's their bagging situation going to be looking like? It's going to be Iron Monkey and Kiralte, which is okay, but not spectacular. Kiralte, he's a utility player. He'll play whatever role necessary, but I feel like he's a C tier runner and a C tier bagger. Bagging, if he were to, he's not really a tried and true bagger. If he were to practice more, I do think you could see him maybe bumping up to a B, possibly an A if he grinds. But I just don't think Kiralte has enough bagging practice to, contend with the likes of Mac and, Mac, Kion, Bobby, the top level baggers. So we'll see what happens. Iron Monkey, he's going to be their starting bagger, I think. And we'll see how that turns out because he's a more recent bagger. So I don't have too much to say about Iron Monkey. The running department is actually solid. That was another question mark I had. Will Crash play? Will Kevin play? Will Neon play? Yes, all three of them are playing, as well as Lucid. You have the AV chemistry between Lucid and Kevin. You also have Jonas slotting in. This is a very interesting addition. And Paul last season was relegated to a bagger rather than a runner because they didn't really have a bagger at the time. They had Jiren as a sub bagger, but Jiren is not the most consistent bagger in the world, so Paul kind of took it upon himself to grind bagging. But I thought for sure we would see Paul in the running department at the very least because he's a strong runner. But they have Jonas coming in over him. I'd say Jonas has a lot of experience, notably in the pre-Weem days. Has kind of fallen out in recent years a little bit, but lately he's been grinding, and he's kind of gone at least close to his previous run of form back in 2016, 2015, and we'll see how Jonas kind of comes back. It's kind of a comeback story for him. We'll see how he does in the first team in Germany. I'm gonna put them, I want to say A tier, but the bagging situation makes me want to put them in B tier. I'm going to keep them in A tier. And then a fourth runner, potentially Neon. You also have Jonas, Marcus, Sane, who's a new prospect coming up from IS. Donaldinho, he's also known as Donaldinho, kind of a new player, but he's been coming up the ranks. They have a lot of running depth, running solidity, and that top three, the front three in Lucid, Kevin, and Crash is just absolutely filthy. So I have A tier for Germany. Next up, we've got the land of Greece. All right, Greece. When you think of Greece, the first thing you think of is Dacia. Dacia being an absolutely vital player to Darag and their success that they saw in MKPS Spring Split and MKPS as a whole. That being said, though, they have a couple other runners that can back them up. You have Nikos, notably. VC Nikos, very strong runner. Every now and again, maybe when he gets up to first, struggles a little bit with certain tracks. But overall, he has a very good knowledge of the game. And overall, decent runner in, like, I'd say the top 4 spots, top 5 spots. Kind of a difficult player to get him out of those spots. But when he's in first, he kind of gets put under a little bit of pressure. But, all around strong runner. You also have Steve. You also have Miles in the bagging department. Very experienced bagger. Maybe not as solid of a bagger lately because he's been kind of inactive. Maybe a little bit more active nowadays. As a fourth runner, who do I see? Maybe Nogs or Ultra Saint. But I think they're lacking a little bit in that strong fourth runner that could really help them solidify top spots I think they're lacking a little bit in a schlagging presence. So we'll see what happens there. I'm going to be putting Greece in the D tier, ladies and gentlemen. We got Team Ireland. Team Ireland is going to the C tier. I think they're a little top heavy. Maybe not as top heavy as Denmark or Norway, which I'll get into. I mean, Norway, you have several D1 runners, and then after that you have C, D tier level players. We'll get into that later. Virtually the same roster as last season, really, aside from the bagging situation. Last season, it was Matt bagging for a couple of Ireland Matt bagging for a couple of races. You also had Trashy as a bagger, but he didn't play every week. I think it was just a lack of availability. Trashy, I think he's already hit his ceiling bagging. Knows all the bagging strats, but he's not super strong with some of those bagging strats. And, the likes of RBC, for example, kind of struggles a little bit with, blocking the bagger off, and also struggles a little bit with making stairs. In the running department, they have a couple good runners. They have Luke Irie, also known as Luke the Toolbox. You have Sean Irie. You got Roy in the running. Obviously, Roy is arguably the best bagger in the history of MKW. But, he's going to be running. Most certainly going to be running. And then as a fourth runner, you could say Darug is going to be a good fourth runner. They actually had a Bisseri, but they removed Abyss. They kicked him outright. So I think Darug could slot in as that fourth runner. Also Dermo as a backup bagger to Trashy, by the way. But Dermo could be, a second string runner. LT also, I completely forgot about LT. You could see LT over Darug, actually. I think LT is going to be the fourth runner over Darug. So, running, overall, not too bad. But I think the bagging is a little bit iffy, really. I think Dermo should be the first bagger over Trashy, personally. And Dermo is probably a B-tier bagger, I'd say. Knows all the strats, a little bit more consistent than Trashy at them. Takes a risk every now and again, like DDR. You may see him going straight back without waiting, for example. But Dermo's a decent bagger overall. But I'm going to keep Ireland in the C tier because Luke the Toolbox, not too... hasn't really played Wars that much lately. Sean Irie, I don't think, has either. LT has been playing a lot of Wars. I know that. He's been coming up the ranks. But other than that, they're lacking a little bit in running depth. You could see Cormac or Nalal, but I don't think they're going to break the plane, really, in terms of, those tough matchups against the B, A, S tier level teams. So I'm going to keep them at C. Next up, we got Italia. And Italy is a very interesting team because you have several departures and several additions, with there being pros and cons to both. No Trattore, who kind of already hit his ceiling back in 2017, but still a decent runner. No Venom, who was kind of a fringe fourth runner anyway. And lastly, no Dugo, who is the most infamous schlagger in MKW history. In terms of additions, though, they have Roz, who's been a very much improved runner. In terms of additions, they do have Roz, who's been a very much improved runner in 2020 and 2021. He kind of went from an IS bench warmer in 2019 to a very important runner for them in the first team currently. And Sal is arguably a top 20 runner in the entire game. I'm going to make that argument. Sal, very strong lines, very good reactions when he's in the top spots. If someone tries to snipe him immediately, he's going to recognize that threat. Very good at getting players out of top spots. Overall, an absolute force in the top 2, top 3 spots. I'd say, not just strong lines, but also the item usage and the overall awareness of the field. Alex, also a good runner, maybe not as strong in terms of avoiding backspams and keeping top spots, but also a strong runner lines-wise. Cross is the definition, I'm sorry to say Cross, but he is the definition of a TT bot. He's a very stubborn player, I gotta say. Very strong lines, but he's, over the years, he has a lot of experience playing the game, but he's still very stubborn. When he's in a top spot, he's behind someone, he'll always stay tight, and, sometimes he's gonna get hit by a backspam kind of easily. So if he can work on that a little bit, then I think Cross will be a better runner, I'd say, overall for this side. You have Roz that could be a fourth runner, and he's very much improved lately. Italy last season was lacking quite a bit because you had Sal and Alex, but Cross, would constantly hit back spams. Roz wasn't as strong of a runner last season. He's very much improved. And then you have, Lodon and Gala, who constantly drop, 70 points, 80 points. You never see them really break away. So having Roz as a fourth runner is very key because he's improved a lot lately. That being said, they're lacking a little bit in running depth. The bagging is perfect. You got Kion, who's, come up the ranks like out of nowhere. Starting Mo bagger, very solid across the board. And then you have Scamp, who's also a strong bagger. Ace as a third string. You know what? I'm liking Italy's chances this year. I'm putting them in the B tier. Team Japan, and this season, they're going 100%. They're going 100%. I'm sorry, that was kind of cringe, but I was quoting Trace Trades. But they're going all out this season. I mean, they got really strong runners. They got Asmact, Type, Jan, Pachu, Yasuo, Hidoke, who's also a notable prospect coming up the ranks lately, notably a lounge player. But, I mean, they've got a lot of running presence. I mean, this is looking insane. Bagging situation also solid. You got Roast and Seabass. Seabass is a little bit more of an experienced bagger, but not as consistent, I'd say, as someone like Roast. And this is only a one-off because I've only played Seabass once, and that was in MK World Cup 2020, LTA versus Japan in the quarterfinals. Seabass made a few mistakes, and whether it was because of stream nerves or whatnot, but Roast is a very solid bagger all across the board, very consistent from what I've seen. This lineup all across the board solid. Asmac, solid lines in first and second. Type, you put him in any position, he's going to thrive. You put him in a running position, he's going to run. You put him in a mid-pack position, his schlagging ability is pretty good. Jan has experience in both, Wars and Lounge. Jan, overall strong runner. Pachu, maybe a little bit more of a person you'd see in the mid-pack making plays, but also a decent runner in his own right. Yasuo, decent runner. I mean, they're looking solid all across the board. Japan, going straight to the S tier. Next up is my team last year. Not my team this year. It's going to be Lusophone Alliance. But last year, compared to last year, it's virtually the same roster aside from the additions in Lunahov and Mephisto coming from Team Mexico, who are not playing this season, as well as Elmer/Gabo and Jay Sully in the bagging. And the bagging situation is looking okay. Jay Sully is a very, very good bagger. Underrated as well. He hasn't had too much love from the community, but he's an underrated bagger. Very unorthodox every now and again with certain strats that he takes. For example, in RBC, he likes to align really, really wide from that rail and likes to cut inside, making it very difficult to block him off. The running department, virtually the same from last season. You're going to be seeing the likes of Mike, Gomez, and Akmeef as the front three. The fourth runner is a big question mark. Nact, ideally, will be the fourth runner, Nact/Miguel, but he's a bit of an oddball. Like, he doesn't play the game that often. He doesn't really take the game too seriously, let's be honest. I mean, it is Mario Kart Wii after all. It's not gossipable, but it's either going to be him or Elmer/Gabo, which I've seen, scrimming with them a lot, but Gabo hasn't really impressed me too much. I'm sorry to say. If you're watching this, Gabo, I'm sorry. He hasn't really impressed me too much. Not that good of running presence. He kind of struggles a little bit in keeping the top spots. Broly has been playing this game for God knows how long, ever since the FW days, but also inconsistent. Makes a mistake here and now, and also not the best lines in the world. Ayanami, who's also known as Dose, kind of on the same level as Broly in terms of the lines. Not super strong lines, so we'll see how this LTA team does going forward. Also, another question mark I have is chemistry. I mean, if you have seen an LTA VOD, at least at one point, you're going to see them arguing. You're going to see them bickering. But it's weird because the more they argue, it seems to me like the better they play. It's what really drives them. The likes of Gomez and Mike, they're constantly confronting one another. They're constantly, having the shot calls conflicting with one another. And, they're constantly bickering. They're like Kyle Busch in NASCAR. The more pissed you get, the better you play.
Our leaders are racing hard here. I really don't give a What a disaster! Holy got a wrecked bucket of freaking destroyed.
I'd say maybe that's the case for Gomez, but Mike, when he tilts, he does play a little bit worse. But, Is the chemistry going to be there? It's always been an issue for LTA, the chemistry and the shot calls and whatnot. So I'm going to have them as a B tier. I would have them as an A tier if they have those front three and maybe Nact playing constantly. Too many question marks for LTA. They're going to the B tier. Lusophone Alliance is going to be next up on the list. And Lusophone Alliance, another team with plenty of question marks, I'd say. I don't want to be too biased about this. Question mark number 1, chemistry. The chemistry has been really off, I will say. That being said, we haven't played too many scrims so far, but the chemistry, we've been mixing a lot of Portuguese and English, and a couple of our players like Lucas, for example, has been struggling a little bit with the English callouts. Just the other day, he was asking, how do you say tight in English? Yeah, it's tight. How do you say apretado in English? Tight. And also, there was a moment in which I was in first, right? And he had a blue, and he said blue instead of I have blue or eu tenho blue, which is I have blue in Portuguese. He just said blue. And I had to stop in first because I thought he meant there was a blue in the air. But then I'm like, where's the blue? And I was like, oh, Lucas, if you have the blue, say I have blue, please. Also with the POWs, I think you had Majora running, but Majora is not going to be one of our main players. Majora also struggled with the callouts. I was saying POW now, and he didn't register it. POW now, please. Usa POW agora, meaning use POW now. But the main lineup is going to be me, Monies, Znaki, maybe Gaga, who's not really that much not known in this community, but very solid TTs. Hasn't played Wars too much, but we'll see how he does in terms of he knows a lot of English too, so that's going to be good. And then the bagging is either going to be Vestoga / Reika / Swa, many different names, or Hidan. Bagging, I think both of them have a lot of upside, but right now they need a lot of practice, need a lot of work. I'm going to be putting them in the D tier. Chemistry, I would put them in F right now, but I think by the time World Cup comes, they'll be at a D tier. Next up on the list is Team Netherlands, and they look a little depleted from last season. I don't want to go as far as to say they're as depleted as, the Timmy Jimmy team, right? We got right here. But no Leops, obviously, because Leops quit the game entirely, really. So no Leops, and then no Dane either. He was almost as important as Leops was to the team, so they're really going to feel the blow of missing those two players. Well, they have a couple okay runners in Thomas. You have Meest, who's a very experienced player, but hasn't played too much lately. You have Leon, who's okay. Job, who has a lot of experience in the lower divisions with IF, notably. Decent runner, but really hasn't had experience in that top echelon of play. So I think he's going to have to start grinding wars a little bit with Netherlands. Cora could be an okay runner, but makes a couple of individual errors here and then. Bagging situation is looking very solid. They got Joris, a lot of experience with AV. Maybe not a lot of experience with AV and bagging in general. He started bagging back in 2019, but solid bagger. Very safe bagger, however. He's usually the one to let the other bagger commit first in tracks like DDR and Peach Gardens. Also, doesn't hit boxes until lap 3 when his team's falling behind, from what I've noticed with playing against him. Very safe bagger, but in terms of strats, very consistent with making those strats. Neo is a decent bagger as well. I'd say Neo's more of a B-level bagger. Joris is a borderline A, but I'm going to put him in the C tier. I think they're lacking a little bit in overall running depth, and I think that may pose a problem. You also have Tom from AP, but I think he's kind of fallen off. He was a little bit better in 2015, 2016, but he's already hit his ceiling in recent years, so I'm keeping them in the C tier. Next up, you got Team Norway, and this is the definition of a top-heavy side. You got Barney, Fox, and Noctil, but then you also have Kion, Genu, and Sakno. I mean, Kion is a decent runner, but I haven't really seen him playing too much. I would like to say that Kion is going to be that ideal fourth runner. Genu, he's a utility player, but he's not super strong in either position, bagging or running. Sakno, I actually not too familiar with. But, if they can play Barney, Fox, Noctil, and Kion consistently, especially with Twin G bagging, very, very good bagger. I'm going to say he's a B-tier bagger overall. I think they're going to be looking solid. Not too much to say about Norway. I'm going to be putting them in the A tier. If they can come out with those lineups consistently, A tier. All right, we've got Scotland. They're going to be making their debut this season, their MK World Cup debut. They C tier has not gotten too much love, but just from what I'm seeing here, I think they are C tier level. You have a couple of decent runners that could keep them afloat. You have the likes of Online, Luna. You also have Aaron Sko, who is more of a lounge player, but he has a decent knowledge of the game, good item usage. Lines are okay. I do think you could see him in the starting lineup every now and again. You could probably see either Lewis or Lachlan as a fourth runner. But other than that, I think they're lacking a little bit in the overall running depth. Sorry, I forgot about Ryan. That's Ryan Sko. Very prominent bagger. Also, has a lot of trolling experience in Troll Wars back in the day. Yeah, let me continue now that the lighting is a little bit better. But Ryan, I think he's going to be running. Like I said, has a lot of trolling experience, so I think he could use that to his advantage if he ever finds himself in the middle of the pack. He can slag and whatnot. So I'd say the starting lineup will be Ryan, Online, Luna, and either Aaron or Lachlan, and then Sammy bagging. And then if necessary, they could have Ryan or Dino. Actually, Dino could be the secondary bagger if they're going to have Ryan continuously running. Other than that, though, I think they lack a tiny bit in depth. All these runners are okay. Lewis is okay, Ross is okay, Oliver is okay. But I just think, they're the definition, really, of a C-tier team. I feel like they really embody the C-tier. Nothing special, but not too bad either. I think they'll manage. Next up, we got España. They're borderline D, but I'm going to stick them in the F. Spain, their chemistry is already good. It's already solid. These players have already played with each other for a while. You have Francis, Jesus, Jorge, Monster, Q. All 5 of those players play for Shadow Team. You also have Alix with 3 X's, who's been playing with some of these players, but I don't think he is in Shadow Team. But he's been playing with some of these players. I'd say in terms of players that are decent runners, I'd say Francis, Alix with 3 X's, even though he does hit backspans a little bit too easily, a decent runner. The bagging is a little questionable. Q is the bagger, but every now and again in heavy tracks like BCW and MT tends to fall behind quite a bit. We'll see what happens with Team Spain. I have them in F tier right now. Especially if Russo plays time in and time out, I want to stick them in the D. But for now, I'm sticking them in F. I think too many question marks going into this, and the bagging situation is very iffy, so I'm sticking them in F. Switzerland. Initially, I had them in F, but they've come out with a recent addition. Breaking news. They have, quote, revised their lineup, but Revise will be a part of the squad. That'll bump them up to a D tier. Other than Revise, they have a couple of okay runners. They have Mi Omega, who's decent. They have Rob Swanson, who, performed decently last season, but he hasn't really played much of any MKW at all. Franco, who's also kind of on the same boat, a little bit more, plays a little bit more than Rob Swanson. Zach Ruff, I think, may be bagging for them, but other than that, I think they're lacking a little bit in overall running solidity. I think Revise and Mi Omega will be a pretty decent duo, but other than that, I'm going to stick them in the D tier. All right, now we've got the USA teams, baby. We got the USA teams, and when you think of USA, you immediately think of S tier, right? This may be a bit controversial. I'm gonna be putting them in the A tier. First off, let me come out with the starting lineup right off the gate. So I'm gonna say Jaker, Quinn, Sane, Ken, and Bobby. Casper's in the lineup, but don't get it confused with Casperinos. That's EM/California Mexican Casper, whatever you want to refer to him as. I think he could be a strong runner, honestly. I think lately he's brushed up on his consistency and his mental game. I think back then in 2018, 2019, he would tilt pretty easily, but I think he's brushed up on that. He's kind of matured lately. So I think you could put maybe Casper over Ken, but I think Ken is a little bit more of an established player, has been playing the game since pre-Weem, and he's a strong force up there. Decent playmaking ability as well. You could have Casper as a first runner. Hawk could also be up there, but he hasn't really played the game that much, quite frankly. I don't really think he enjoys the game as much anymore. He's more of a business type of figure in the MKPS scene. He's a board member. But I think he kind of lost the love for the game a little bit. Backkick, also another strong runner. Has a bit of issue with comms though, so if he can work on that a little bit with shot calls and whatnot, I think he'll be just fine. Bagging situation's good. Bobby and Serena. I'm really glad to see Serena playing in the international stage. I really want to see how he does because he's been a very much improved bagger in 2020. 2019 he was an okay bagger, but he was maybe C tier. He's gone all the way up to an A tier bagger, I gotta say, and Bobby S tier bagger. The reason why I put them in the S tier is the question marks in the bench running. I think the starting lineup is going to be perfect, but the bench running, like I said, Backkick, a bit of issues with comms, very, very strong lines, I got to say. Every now and again, inconsistent, though. Every now and again makes a mistake or two in a war that can cost his team. Is Sane going to be playing every week? That's a question. He has also kind of lost his love a little bit for the game. Vincent, also an example of a top-level player who's kind of inconsistent every now and again. I'm going to keep them in A tier. Lastly, we got USA North. They're going straight to the S tier. I mean, all across the board, you have running solidity and consistency across the board. Maybe Frozen every now and again makes a mistake, but he is arguably, when he's on his day, a top 5 player in the game. You got Edison, Frozen, Casper, who could easily slot into the starting lineup, those three. And then maybe as a fourth runner, you could see Sean or Killua. Revan has been coming up the ranks. He's come from a B tier runner in 2019 or 2019 C tier, B tier in 2020 to an S tier immediately. Kind of had a really quick jump up. So we'll see how he does in the top level of play. Neo is a decent runner who's very consistent and can call the shots every now and again. Consistency is the name of the game with this lineup. I mean, Edison has come up the ranks lately as a runner. Has a lot of experience in the game, but he bagged for WZ, but now he's back in the running department. Very consistent runner. Killua, consistent runner. Neo, consistent runner. Frozen, even though now every now and again he makes a mistake, very strong runner, top 5 in the game, I'd say. Sean is a little inconsistent, unfortunately, but Revan has come to be a more consistent player lately. Ornan, very consistent. I mean, any of these players can play in the starting lineup. All of them are candidates. I think the running depth is there. The bagging is solid. You have Mac, who's arguably the best bagger in the game. You have Orange, who's been coming up the ranks lately. Maybe a top 10 bagger in the game right now, but could easily back up Mac when needed. I'm liking the chances for USA North here. Yeah, so that's going to be it for my tier list. This is my final list right here. I got 3 teams in S, England, Japan, USA North. And those are the 3 teams that I feel have the best shot of winning the entire tournament. I think US South is certainly a dark horse in this A tier level here. Also, Norway, if they can consistently bring out the starting 4 of Barney, Fox, Noctil, and Kion, Twin G bagging, that's going to be a force to be reckoned with. Germany and Canada, I don't think they'll have enough to really make it all the way, but I certainly think they'll be in contention for maybe making the quarterfinals or semifinals even if they make a dramatic push. But we'll see what happens going forward. This is my final tier list. I moved from the beginning of the video. I moved Denmark up a place and Canada up a place. So that's going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you guys on the next one.